I'm Don Cantor, former co-director of JLIC at Johns Hopkins University and current director at the Richmond Jewish Learning Experience in Richmond, Virginia.
And I'm Alex Ozar, co-director of JLIC at Yale University, and this is the Torah JLIC podcast. JLIC supports thousands of young Jews in their college years and beyond, providing them with the nourishment they need to sustain an upward trajectory of Jewish commitment and growth as they enter the broader world. And the animating engine of that effort, that has always been and will always be Talmud Torah. High-level, richly meaningful, thoughtfully creative Torah learning, ambitiously attuned to the realities of where our students are. On the Torah JLIC podcast, we hope to share some of that Torah with you. Thanks for listening.
On this episode, we get to talk to Rabbi Tzvi and Tali Wohlgelernter. The Wohlgelernter spent 3 years serving JLIC at Rutgers University before returning to Israel with their 4 daughters, and now serving as the Mizrahi JLIC directors in Givat Shmuel and Bar Ilan, where they support young Olim who live in Givat Shmuel or study in Bar Ilan. Rav Tzvi was called up for reserve duty on October 19th, 2023, and spent 6 months since then serving in Gaza. We look forward to hearing about their experience. Welcome, Wohlgelernters.
Hi, thank you. So good to be here.
Thanks so much for having us.
Oh, how's it been?
Well, isn't that a loaded question? This last year as JLIC directors has been different than any other that we've experienced in the past, both at Rutgers and here in Givat Shmuel and Bar Ilan, with Tzvi away serving in the Army and also still running the community from his base, and me on the ground running the community. It's definitely been multifaceted.
Take us into how things got started October 7th, Shabbat Torah. What was the experience like? What was the process? What happened?
So, as expected, we had a Simchat Torah, Shmini Atzeret, both. In Israel we do both together. We had a minyan planned. Everything was ready to go. The night was actually beautiful. We had a communal meal. Very good vibes. Everyone's really happy. And we usually get to bed pretty late. It's a festive time. And in the morning we hear the first siren. And to be honest, I actually we woke us up at around 6:30, and we turned to each other, and I said, must be a mistake. It can't be that there's it can't be. I didn't hear anything that we expect any issues happening now. So I ended up going back to sleep. Then we woke up again to the second one at 7:30. At that point we already got up, but still not really sure what was going on. I ended up going with my youngest daughter to shul. We had to get there, we had to open up, and I assumed there'd be a lot of people waiting to start the minyan. And on the way, one of our community members actually drove by us in a car, and he was headed towards the first responders unit. And I got a brief kind of comment from him that there are things going down, things are heating up in the south, but I'm not really sure. He didn't yet get the official update, but things are bad. So I didn't know yet what to do, so I ended up going to shul. We started the meeting, but everybody there already was nervous and knew that something was going on, and it wasn't really clear. And then people from the city came and told us that anybody who's in the army should turn on their phones already. So there went half our minyan. A bunch of people already they turned on their phones. People got called up already. They started leaving. After that, another representative of the city came and told us that we have to shut down the minyan. And then the person who was in charge of the first responders unit, since I'm officially part of it, told me to turn my phone on, get in the car, and wait for directions.
One thing, the person who came to shut down the minyan said we had to shut down the minyan, but he asked for an aliyah first, if I remember correctly.
Why did you have to shut down the minyan?
Because there was a lot of confusion. Nobody knew what was going on. Rockets were coming, and it wasn't safe to be out. At that point also, there's knowledge that there were terrorists that infiltrated into Israeli territory. We have no idea how far they're getting. We know that it's not a good situation. We keep on getting updates about the casualty numbers, but it's just very, very unclear. So ultimately, when I got the call, I was at home. And this was not long afterwards, but I got the call that I need to go to one edge of the city. And pretty much what we did is we shut down the city. We blocked it off. We made a machsom that we were able to block off each road, all the entrances into the city, and to pretty much check every single person coming in to make sure that there will be no infiltration of terrorists into the city. Again, there's a lot of pandemonium. What was interesting is that a lot of people who saw us, that we were standing and that we were blocking the roads and we were checking, we actually had people coming over and bringing us food and trying to like kind of like lighten the mood. And it still was it's weird because it was a holiday. So everyone wants to say Chag Sameach, but like, we don't know. There's still a lot going on. Terrible things are happening. We don't know what's happening. But everyone's trying to get involved and do what they can because they recognize that, the Jewish people need to stand together right now. We know things aren't good and that we're going to it was instinctual that we need to start coming together and banding together as one people. And I already off the bat started feeling that, the minute reports started coming in.
I'll just give my perspective because I wasn't actually at Shul. One of our daughters wasn't feeling well that morning, so I stayed home with her. And at around noon, any good JLIC director, I started preparing lunch for the swarm of guests that I was expecting. And at that point, from where I was sitting in my kitchen, all I knew was we had a few sirens that morning, and that's it. So I, went about my business, preparing lunch, and this is around 12:30. I wasn't expecting anyone home before at least 1:30. This is Simchat Torah. We were expecting a very lively minyan. We were expecting it to be, an extended davening. And all of a sudden, our third daughter sprints up the stairs. She had gone to shul with Tzvi. She sprints up the stairs and she says, Ima, we drove home from shul. And that knocked the wind right out of me. Literally, I had to sit down because hearing that they drove home from shul on Simchat Torah without realizing that there was anything going on was an extreme shock to me on my end. And when Tzvi came in and told me what he had heard, which was really very minimal, there was some kind of attack in the south. Things were pretty bad, and he was on call for the first responders for the Kitat Konanu. So we had very minimal information, which added to the fear factor. Although the information that we would have had would have been as scary as what we could have even imagined. So. Or even worse, actually. So it was definitely a tense morning, which led to a very tense rest of the year.
How many people in your community are serve in the IDF versus maybe they made Aliyah later and they didn't serve?
So I'd say a large portion of our community did serve in the IDF. A lot of them had an exemption similar to what I had also. We can talk later how I ended up getting back into the army. But when we do the program called Machal, Mitnadvei Chutz La'aretz, so what ends up happening is they give you an automatic exemption from reserve duty. So there were a bunch of people in our community who had that exemption. It could be even a majority of people, at least of the men, did army service. For sure, with the women, there are some that did army service and there are some that did Shirut Leumi, but most people did something. And the truth is, over the course of the year, many of those people that originally had an exemption actually were able to get back in and now are part of a unit, were part of the fighting, are currently in Gaza right now fighting. And there's I even know of someone who is only going in at the beginning of August. Also, someone who had an exemption is only going in now. But there was definitely a nice portion that was in the army already, from the beginning. Getting called back.
It's incredible to hear you say people who have an exemption were able to get into the army anyway, that they were so eager to go serve.
Yeah, not only were they able to go serve, they actually had to request an exemption from their exemption. Like Tzvi was calling every contact he had, any person he knew who was in any logistical unit in the army to try to get that exemption from the exemption that he was given. So it was definitely inspiring to see that, not just in our own house, but many of our community members also had the same experience.
So take us into the following month. So Tzvi, you're off serving, and Tali, you're at home caring for your family and your community, and so you're still caring for your community. What was that like?
So I guess I'll start. For the first week, so we did what we could to try and galvanize the community as much as possible. The people that didn't go in yet, everybody wanted to get involved in some way, trying to do volunteer positions, things that we could do, such as farming. We were sending people a couple a week going on farming missions to help out, all different types of volunteering opportunities that came available. Really, everybody wanted to do something, and it wasn't a time to talk about what was going on. It was very much a time at the beginning of action. People wanted, ourselves included, but everybody wanted to do something. We very much felt helpless and we needed to take control of the situation. And the best way to do that was to do something, whatever it was. And people were volunteering for babysitting, for Miluim families, for packing food, for anything that can be done. People were volunteering and trying to do something. People were begging for volunteer opportunities. We did our best to try and facilitate that. And then while we were doing that, of course, in my own head is like, okay, I did the army. I gotta get in. This is crazy. It can't be that I'm not going to be part of this. And I'm texting, every type of every person that I know, anything that I can think of to get in with. And at some point, there was a WhatsApp chats that were developed that were posting positions needed in Miluim. They needed spots filled. Right, again, when Hamas attacked, they felt that we were weak, the Jewish people were weak. We were at a deep fighting point. Overall, Israel and the Jewish people in general were not so united. And they thought that they would catch us when we're weak, and then we wouldn't be able to get ourselves together. But what was amazing was to see the response of Jews around the world, and especially of Israelis, that we're going to fight and we're going to come together and you can't defeat us. And so there was a huge percentage of volunteering for coming back to be in Miluim, and all these new units are being started, and there was also, it wasn't clear yet what was going to happen or the direction the war was going to take. So there was a lot of pandemonium. But I was able to, so I was just texting all the time in this group, trying to find if they're looking for, the qualification you're looking for. And ultimately, I ended up getting a call that I've been selected to be in a unit. Now, that unit that I was in was actually connected to the Rabbanut, and I was going to help with. It was actually a Totchanim unit, which is artillery, and I was going to help with be with the guys and help with on any religious needs that are needed. Now, my background is I have a combat background, and specifically Khir, which is infantry. Right, I was in the Nachal Brigade, and but this is where they needed me, so I went in. Long story short, there were some complications from their side. And I ended up being connected to an Ugda, which is I don't even know what the English translation of it is, but it's a massive unit that has, I think, around 12,000. Our Ugda, 12,000 soldiers in it, doing all different things, from combat to intelligence to logistics, everything. And I was working directly with the head rabbi of that Ugda. And one of the things I was doing was actually writing talking points from the Parsha to be sent out to commanders to try and give strength to their soldiers. And it was a fascinating experience because primarily I was writing to a non-religious crowd but they were looking for inspiration. This was before the ground invasion began, right? The spirits were up. There was a lot of energy, and it was kind of try to keep that up and to give inspiration from the Torah. So that was an amazing experience. But ultimately, I felt that I was needed elsewhere, and I heard about a certain unit. It's actually a classified unit that's called Yasar, and which stands for Yechidat Srika. The best way to explain it is it's a combat zaka, which means it takes combat soldiers, primarily former infantry soldiers, and we go into enemy territory to either collect pieces of bodies after explosions, things like that, or particularly in this war, we actually went on missions to try and rescue bodies of hostages that were either taken on October 7th or were killed as hostages. And I felt that it was a very, very tough job. I honestly didn't know if I was up for it, but I knew that they needed people for it, and I had the necessary background, so I ended up joining that unit. This is at the beginning of November, and that's officially my unit that I'm part of. And I've taken part, unfortunately, of many operations and missions that we had to go on. So the most amazing thing, before I pass the phone off to Tali, is that the thing that gave me a lot of strength and continues to give me a lot of strength is the fact that if you think about what we were doing, there is no other unit in the world, in any other army, like our unit. It only exists in the IDF. And there's a reason for that. It's because of the high value that we place on Jewish burial, which really is representative of the high value that we place on life, and that every soldier going in knows that we're going to do everything that we can to bring them back under any circumstance. Every single person in my unit would fight to get on every mission, even though you can imagine we have to deal with a lot of gruesome things. But the fact that there's even a chance that we might be able to give a Jew a proper burial and that their family will have somewhere to go to, every single person was fighting to risk their life for that opportunity. And when I saw that, I understood that the Jewish people can't be defeated, that the spirit was unbreakable. I guess from Tali's perspective.
That's incredible. I just want to break in and point out, like, on a brighter note, it seems like I could be wrong that the unit you were serving in first also seems to be a pretty unique position. That you're writing words of Torah to help soldiers. It's just an incredible thing that we have a Jewish army that functions like that.
Yeah, it was really an amazing experience. As I would say in general, with that first position that I was in, I had one particularly powerful experience. Is we finished right near the beginning of the war. We finished Kedushin in Daf Yomi. And so I made the siyum. I made the siyum on the base, and someone sponsored a barbecue, as there's a lot of barbecues that was being sponsored in general. And the soldiers of all backgrounds came, and just singing, dancing, celebrating, completing the Torah, or at least Masechet of Gemara, and just like the excitement, the passion that the Jewish life is still vibrant despite all the challenges that we're going through. That was also very, very heartening, and it was really a big merit for me. Like I felt very, very humbled to be kind of in that position and just to help. And I would additionally add that there's a lot of Israeli soldiers that were begging for, and again, I'm talking about people, tattoos everywhere, no religious background whatsoever. They were begging for tzitzit, for maybe a chumash or a sidur to bring with them into Gaza, like just to see that passion just awaken inside of them. And I'm not talking about one or two people, meaning there were a lot of people that I saw that had this passion and were asking for more and more. They wanted more to bring with them, and they were upset if we ran out of tzitzit. They were like visibly upset. They ran out of tzitzit. They're like, give me their numbers, call me when it comes in. Like it was an amazing thing to see.
Oh, that's really wonderful. Thank you.
So I had the tremendous privilege and challenge of raising our girls by myself, pretty much at this stage. And they were pretty scared. When Tzvi left in uniform, this was the first time they'd ever seen him in uniform. For me, it was kind of a throwback to when we were dating. And my naive little seminary girl self gets to marry a soldier. Oh, how cute. It's not so cute when you're sending your husband off to war. And the girls, rightfully so, were pretty scared to see their father go off to a unknown battlefield. So as far as they were concerned, Abba's job in the army was basically to be the JLIC rabbi in the army. And initially, in his first position, that kind of, oversimplifying it, but that's a lot of what he did. It was about morale boosting. It was about creating a spiritual atmosphere within the unit. Logistics around religious experiences within the unit and things like that. So at first, it was easy to keep up that perspective for the girls. I was doing JLIC in the army. He's taking care of the soldiers. He's making sure they have what they need. And they totally understood that because our kids are being raised in a JLIC house. This has been, for the last greater portion of their lives, and some of them their whole lives, we've been a JLIC family. It's not, it's funny, we're called JLIC couples, but I think a better term is really JLIC family, because our girls are as much part of it as we are. And they get as much, they get, I think, as much credit even in what we do, if not more sometimes than what we do. So at first, I was able to maintain that positive vibe in the house while also keeping the community running to the best of my ability. It was definitely a challenge balancing what I needed to do at home and also what I needed to do for the community. And at the time, I was alone in running the community. We are so lucky that we have an assistant couple who work with us, but at the time that the war broke out, they hadn't yet come to live in the community. So I was essentially doing the job of what was supposed to be for 4 people. I was tasked and blessed to do that on my own. And tremendous credit to the community members who stepped up and really helped take on many of the roles that I couldn't do. We were able to keep the momentum going of many of the projects that we have in the community, whether it was social events, learning events, and expanded to chesed opportunities within the war. These were things that were undertaken by our community members and overseen by me and Tzvi when he was home. And what I found to be incredible was that whenever Tzvi got out for 24 to 48 hours from the army, he slipped straight back into JLIC mode. There was no downtime. There was no okay, let me re-energize or take a break. He was right back to Minyan, to Shiurim, to everything. There was no gap in what he did, which sometimes frustrated me because I was just sleep for a few minutes, just rest. But in his mind, and it's his passion. It's his whole life, this community. It's not just a job. It's a passion, and it's a future that we see, and it's a potential in the community that we're building together that we couldn't let that slip during this time, and not only not let it slip, but use this as an opportunity to galvanize the community and work together to be strong and, take each other's strengths and work with those. So it was for sure a challenging time, but it was very inspirational to be on my end of it and see how the community stepped up and also how Tzvi's passion really didn't waver for 1 second throughout this war.
We'd love to hear some of the Torah ideas or texts that you were drawing on for yourselves, for your own spiritual sustenance to get you through this challenging time, and what you shared with your community or with your soldiers.
Sure. So there's a couple of pieces. The truth is that it's interesting when it comes to Torah during this time. So at the beginning, I actually found it very difficult to learn. My mind was racing a lot, and it was very hard to concentrate. But as time wore on, I actually had a tremendous thirst for learning. I missed Torah. It was it came back to me, and I had this amazing yearning. And I would just keep books as far in my pockets, in my army pocket, and just have something with me, so all the time. So I really, really wanted to learn. Even at my Mempei, one of my commanders, he was yelling at me. We're in Gaza at one point, and he's like, "Why are you reading right now?" It's it's a smoke break. I don't smoke. I want to learn something. So you can smoke, and I can learn a little bit. But it did become a passion. There's one particular piece that I think that I drew on in particular, and that is. But it's important to have some background, and that is before October 7th. It's not a secret that the Jewish people were in a disarray. I think by Yom Kippur, by Motzi Yom Kippur, the tensions in Israel reached an all-time high of just the disunity that was going on in the entire country. And obviously right after October 7th, there was a huge change and everyone was coming together, and everybody noticed it. I didn't need to be a rabbi to point that out to people. Everybody felt it. Everybody noticed it. And for me, that was something that gave me a lot of life, and it was something that I wanted. My biggest fear is that I don't want to lose it again. I don't want to get to where we were beforehand. Even in our own community, we had a little bit of tensions with the non-religious community in Givat Shmuel. So we even had tensions in our own community, and I wanted now to use this as opportunity to really bring home the idea that we are one people and we have to be united, and it's okay that we have differences of opinion. It's even a good thing that we have differences of opinion. And I think when it really hit me strong was my first mission into Gaza. So the way it works is we go to a certain point that's by the border, and then we have a briefing, and we have a tadrich, a briefing of all the different people that are going to be participating in this operation or in this mission. And now there's me and my unit, a couple guys from my unit that were there. We knew what our mission was or what our objective was, but it's not just us, right? We have a specific job that we have to do, but there are drivers and there's paramedics, and there's all different types of soldiers that were there, that they also had a job and they had a responsibility. And you had all these different units, a couple people from all different types of units, that we were coming together, and we all had different jobs. But we realized that if we each don't do our jobs, we can't be successful in the mission as a whole. But once we all got together, and we all had our uniform on, we had our helmets on, and our bulletproof vests and everything, we were ready to go, then you couldn't tell the difference between us. But we each had a different job. It's not like we were all doing the same thing. We were all doing different things. But we recognized that we would not be successful without each one of us and each of our units, even though we were all different. And the specific piece of Torah that for me, that I was able to draw on, is actually a piece from Rav Kook. And the truth is that Rav Kook talks about it in many places. We could spend hours on this idea, but in particular, in Orot Yisrael, Perek Daled, Piska Vav, so he says something fascinating. He says that even the attribute of sinat chinam, he says, I'll just read the first sentence, midat sinat chinam gam hi tzricha litelot. Even the idea of baseless hatred needs to be elevated. Meaning there's even a place, so to speak, for baseless hatred. Now obviously, baseless hatred is the worst thing in the world, and we want to get rid of it. So what does he mean by that? So he goes on to discuss that there are a lot of different lights or values that exist in this world. And we need all those lights. We need all those values. Without them, we will not be successful in bringing HaKadosh Baruch Hu into the world, into elevating existence, into bringing the world closer to completion, and everything else that we need to do. But if everybody tries to be an expert at everything, you end up being, at best, mediocre at all things. And usually there are many things that you can't do. But if each group of people focus on one specific value or one specific ideal, then they can really elevate that ideal to a higher level, to the level it's supposed to be at. The challenge comes is that we each view our ideal that we care about as the ultimate ideal. And therefore, if somebody has a different ideal than we do, then we think that it's a competition, and they are stepping on our toes, and they are almost attacking our own ideal. But once we recognize that all of these ideals are all in the service of Hashem, and they are all directed towards elevating the world, then the truth is, we can start really loving every single Jew, because we can realize that each person, and the truth is, Rav even says each nationality also, not just the Jewish people, really everybody, ultimately has a purpose, an objective, and a goal. Just like each unit of the soldiers that were with us on that operation. Everybody had their objective. You can't say one is more important than the other. They all needed to be, we all had separate training, and we all had our different jobs. But only if we all did our jobs, then could we actually accomplish what we needed to accomplish. So too, each of us needs to focus on our ideals and to elevate it. And only if everybody's working on their ideals can we ultimately elevate the existence to what we want it to be. And what that means practically is that when I look at someone who has a different opinion than me, when I look at somebody who, I don't know, maybe looks different, dresses different, whatever it is, the truth is that person has values, has ideals that they're working on. And if I just kind of, oh, I love you because you're a Jew, that's not really enough. Because I have a mitzvah of ahavta l'recha kamocha. I have to love you, so I'll love you. It doesn't work that way. We don't just, because there's a pasuk, so all of a sudden I feel it. I actually have to really respect different people and respect that they have a value that they're working on. And the truth is, maybe I'll disagree. And it's possible I will disagree. It doesn't mean I necessarily have to agree. But I do have to respect them. And I have to leave space for them. Because if they can develop themselves and I can develop myself, then we can ultimately reach that completion of the world and the fixing of the world that we're waiting for. But if I'm so busy trying to make another person be like me and take my ideal and my value, then ultimately what's going to happen to the value they're trying to elevate? And so what this Torah does is it allows us to really respect all other people. It's okay that people have different opinions. Not only is it okay, but that's the way it's supposed to be. Because people have different opinions and different values, they can work on elevating those values. Hashem is one. We say in Shema Yisrael that Hashem is one, because ultimately the way we experience things here is in ribui, is in many. and almost that things are in conflict. But ultimately, when it comes to Hashem, everything is united in one. And the more that we can actually respect other people, even though they're different than us, and recognize, but not just because, I have to respect them, but because I actually respect them because I know that they are good people, and I know that they are working on something, then we can actually accomplish what we want to accomplish. And the truth is, I experienced this firsthand, with the guys in my unit. We were all very, very different, but we were able to sit down because we were united, because we recognized that we're all part of Am Yisrael, we're all Israelis, we're all fighting the same war, and we're fighting an actual existential threat to us. So all the other differences kind of didn't matter so much. And yeah, we had plenty of differences. It's not like, I agreed with everything everybody said. I had many, many interesting conversations with people that I completely disagreed with, and they disagreed with me. And you know what? It was totally fine. We kept on talking afterwards, and we're still best friends, and the truth is we would die for each other. And that's the difference. We learn to really respect the other person, even if I don't agree, but I also was able to see that each of these people, they actually do have a lot of positive values about them. Even if there are things in their lives that I don't agree with, they actually have a lot of positive values and things that they're working on. And I came to learn to respect them, and they came to learn to respect me. And that is how we're ultimately going to bring the real Avat Yisrael. That's how we're going to be able to get to a point of to kind of fix that fissure in Israeli society, and really ultimately in the Jewish world all over the world. But to start respecting people that are different, respecting everybody, and recognizing it doesn't mean that we give up on our own values and what we believe in and what we're working on. But it means seeing that on the other side, there's also something going on there. And they're also working on things that are important, even if we don't necessarily agree with everything. And it's a message I try to give to my community. The first time I shared this idea was actually when I was on base and I was able to. Before Shabbat, I would try to send I really tried to keep it under 2 minutes, because I know that it's got to keep short for people to keep attention span. But I tried to keep it on 2 minutes. Sometimes I was successful, sometimes I failed. But I don't think it was ever more than 3 minutes. Just some short idea connected to the parsha that was speaking to me at that time, and I had such positive feedback from it. The truth is, there are certain weeks where I would share an idea, and I got a message after Shabbat from someone in my community who they actually said that idea over on their base to other soldiers, and this idea of that Torah was kind of being spread all over, and that gave me a lot of strength going forward.
It's an amazing feeling and beautiful Torah. Thank you.
I'll share one idea that stuck with me throughout this war. Not a giant piece of Torah, because thank God I had my hands full, and that unfortunately was not at the top of the list. But there was something that kind of galvanized me throughout this entire experience, and that's what I refer to as my favorite pasuk, which is Hazorim B'dima Berina Yiftoru. That when we cry and we plant our tears, ultimately they will blossom. And that those tears are not for nothing. These tears, these struggles, these challenges that we're facing, it's not for nothing. And ultimately it will blossom. It'll blossom into something beautiful. And whether it was dealing with a community member who was struggling because her husband was, she wasn't able to speak to him for weeks at a time, and she felt alone and scared, or dealing with my own daughters who have their own needs and fears. There were lots of tears that we had to deal with throughout this war. And remembering that, and my own tears, by the way, which there were many of, remembering that these tears are not for nothing. These tears that we're shedding as individuals, and more importantly, as a nation, as a community in Givat Shmuel and Bar Ilan, but as a nation of Am Yisrael throughout the world, these tears ultimately will blossom into something beautiful. And the days that I cried the most were the days that I really had to think back and remember that this is not for nothing, and we will get through this, and something beautiful will, Bezrat Hashem, soon blossom into something. So that's what got me through this.
It seems like these are such important ideas to hang on to, and I think, Tzvi, you mentioned that you're worried about what it was that you don't want it to go back to what it was like before. And I've just through just listening to both of you, it's just making me think about how do we hang on to those things. It seems like often we hang on to we try to hang on to things that are maybe a little bit more eye popping and at least initially, like some things like, I don't know, patriotism or general sense of unity or things like that. But really, in order to get there, at least in the long term, it seems like the ideas, the types of things that both of you just mentioned are worth really putting a lot of effort and focus on.
The truth is, it's true what you're saying, and it's very hard for ideas to live just in our head. What we need to do is action, and I'm already planning for this coming year. We want to do things and programming that brings these ideas to life. So, as an example, we already started talking about getting different communities in Givat Shmuel together with our community for certain events. So we have a chance to actually meet and start a dialogue with other communities. And this is something that's real. It's something that's tangible that we can actually do and not just leave it as an idea. So we want to keep it up. We want to do our best to bring this feeling into a reality and not just leave it as a feeling, because feelings are very fleeting. I will tell you, though, that in the Army, for whoever was in the Army, there's no way things are ever going to go back to the way they were. Meaning the bonds that we formed in the Army, the feelings I have towards people in my unit, people that I never would have spoken to in real life. Like our paths would never have crossed in a million years. And now we're best friends. And I'm not saying I'm talking to them every single day and we're going to go out for coffee all the time, but those feelings are real. And it's something that, again, it was a bond forged in blood, in the most, simplistic way, the most literal way possible. And because of that, and then you have a country where a huge amount of people have gone through that experience of war, and experiencing that together. It's something that it can't go back to the way things were before. It's too drastic of a change, and it's too powerful of an experience for it to be the same thing. One of the ideas is trying to transfer those feelings and those ideas to people that weren't in battle, to people that weren't in the Army. They also had their experiences. They also have their trauma. I think everybody living in Israel has their trauma. Could be a lot of Jews around the world also have their trauma. But we're trying to give that feeling over, and I try to give that over to my community members who weren't in the Army at the time, so that they can try to get a little understanding of what it was like. But my objective is to try and actually do events and concrete actions that will bring these ideas to fruition, so that we don't go back to life like it was in Israel pre-October 7th, but that we continue to forge the bonds. And again, I'm giving permission. We're allowed to disagree. We're allowed to argue. But who cares? It doesn't matter. Like, we're so threatened by other people. Why do we feel so threatened? It's our own insecurities. No one says that we have to believe something that we don't believe in. We can believe what we believe in. That doesn't mean that we can't talk to other people that have different opinions than we do. And once we kind of knock down that wall and those barriers, it opens up amazing possibilities. And this is something that I've been talking about pretty much nonstop since the beginning of the war, and it will be something that we are going to be focusing on going forward until we can get it right. Right, as Tisha B'Av is approaching, and we're still in this loop of sinat chinam. Right, we haven't gone over that basis hatred yet. It's about time. The time has come to do something drastic and to start realizing that times have changed, and we don't have to hate each other. We can actually love each other, even when we disagree, and that's okay.
We've been talking about these big, broad ideas about how to transition, hopefully soon, away from war and back to a more peaceful life, and keeping those messages with us. But I want to bring it back maybe a little bit closer to home. And if you could, without getting too personal, really hopefully both of you, talk about what it's been like for Tzvi when you transition home after being through such an intense situation. I mean, you mentioned a little bit before that about what it was like when you were home for 24 or 48 hours. Talk a little bit about that, and maybe also what it was like to come home for a longer period.
Yeah, so it's an interesting mix of of emotions and thoughts that go into it. On one hand, there's no question about it that there's a tremendous yearning for my family. While I'm on base, or definitely while I'm in Gaza, I'm definitely thinking about it. Not saying when I'm busy doing my mission, I'm busy, but I'll definitely have thoughts and I'll have that yearning. And I'm always excited. I'm always excited to come home. At the same time, while I'm at home, there's also this feeling like, well, the war is going on and I'm not there. And, I need to, and especially I hear there's a mission going on or something happened there, and I feel, okay, well, I'm out of it and I need to be there. So it's almost like wherever I am, it's just unsettling. Right? It's unsettling when I'm not at home because I'm thinking about I want to be home, I miss my family. And when I'm at home, I'm almost unsettled and feeling like there's a war going on. How can I just, be enjoying myself at home? I have to, I have to, I have a job to do. I have missions to go on. How could I be at home right now? And also the fact that Tali touched upon this beforehand, but one of my personal challenges is that I did feel for a sense that I was almost abandoning the community while I was in the army. And when I came back, I wanted to try and be there for the community, but at the same time, I first and foremost I had to be there for my family, and it's not an easy balance, and it's something that was I guess always pulling at me. I definitely felt guilty. I think I came to kind of accept it more later on, that I kind of had to, I don't say sacrifice the community, but at the end of the day, that can't be what I'm focusing on right now because my community right now is all of Klal Yisrael, and therefore I need to focus when I get home on my family because that's the most pressing. But it definitely took me a while to get to that understanding. I'll pass to Tali.
So I'll share that the times that Tzvi was away and then the times that he came home were very confusing for all of us, especially for the kids, I think even more so because kids see things very much in black and white. So Abba's away, he's away, Abba's home, they expect Abba to be home. When in reality, rightfully so, his mind wasn't fully back at home, whether it's because it was still on the mission he just came from, or it was on the mission he might be heading to next, and also focused on so much that he wanted to do for the community. For myself, I also was very torn in my role as a mother and also as someone who was running the community in where do I draw my lines? How do I keep myself and my children afloat while also keeping the community afloat and figuring out how to create that balance where sometimes I failed. And it's a huge credit to JLIC and specifically to our supervisor that I was able to create healthy boundaries for ourselves and also for the community so that they could understand, that just like there are Miluim families who need help, we're also a Miluim family. And there were times that we also needed to just say, yes, I'm your community leader, but I'm also a soldier's wife. And right now I can't do things that I would like to do or normally do for the community. So that was definitely something that we had to learn to navigate. And when Tzvi would come home, it also was something we had to navigate as a couple in terms of how to create time for ourselves as parents and also as a couple and also as the JLIC directors. And it was, there are three things that you have to kind of fit into a 24-hour period or 48-hour period that normally are your entire life. It's an ongoing challenge, I will say, because now Tzvi's out and he's been out since the end of June, since mid-June. He's been out since then. And it's still, we're in mid-July now, and we're still really learning how to be together with the trauma that we've faced and are still facing as a nation and as individuals and also as a family. When Tzvi left, we were a family that functioned a certain way, and now we're a family that functions differently because the girls have grown up, the girls have experienced things, Tzvi has experienced things, I've experienced things, and we're all kind of catching each other up on these intense traumas that we've been through in a short period of time that we need to kind of relearn each other, which is bizarre when you've been married for 17 years. We're navigating that for sure. The Army did a tremendous job with mental health care in Tzvi's unit, where after every mission, they would have like a briefing and a breakdown of what they experienced and how it impacted them. And I wasn't there, so I don't know all the details, but I know that he felt very well cared for after those missions. But I think one piece that kind of gets left out is, he would share with me about his missions, and then I don't get the health care or the breakdown after the mission and after the conversation. And it's like, I'm left kind of to deal with that on my own or, seek help on my own, where it's not a given that, the wives of the soldiers are also getting the same debriefing that their husbands are getting. So that's just something interesting that I've noticed that we are navigating also.
Nobody's an island, and everyone's trauma affects everyone else, especially our spouses. It's incredibly powerful.
Thank you so much for sharing this. It's just been very moving and inspirational, and thank you even more for the service that both of you have done for the Jewish people. It's I don't know what to say.
Well, thank you for the service you guys are doing for the Jewish people for this podcast. So very much enjoy it.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you both. And Hatzlacha and continuing the extraordinary things you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you
You
so
guys
much.
as well. Take care.